Hi, I'm Bernadette Giwa from The Story of Telling, and I'm delighted to be here with Seth Godin, who's joined us to answer some questions about some issues I think you guys are having, and just welcome, Seth. Thanks for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me. Thanks for the work you've been doing and the leadership you've been showing. It really makes a difference for people.
Thanks, Seth. One of the things I wanted to talk about is a post you wrote last week, which I found really intriguing, was the difference between building the job as opposed to building the gig or the business.
Right.
I know a lot of people I work with are actually doing the things that you have been encouraging us all to do in Linchpin, which is building their own platforms, getting out there, trying to, make a difference. I just want you to speak to us about this, differentiating between what they should be doing in terms of building the gig.
Well, first, let me be really clear. There's nothing wrong with building a job, just like there's nothing wrong with building a gig. I wasn't saying one was better than the other. I was saying that they were different. So let's say you're a graphic designer and you love to do graphic design. You spend the minimum amount of time you need to get clients and the maximum amount of time doing the design. I mean, that's what designers do. So in that case, you're building a job, right? That you want enough bosses to keep you busy doing your design. But if it wasn't for the design, you wouldn't want to be doing any of this. That's very different than someone who builds a gig, right? Someone, Tim Armstrong, who's running AOL. What does Tim do all day? Does he program? Does he do the illustrations on the site? No, he doesn't do any of those things. What he does is he builds the thing. It's the building that's what he gets out of bed in the morning to do, not the actual making of the product. And so what I was trying to make the distinction between is if you want the gig, then make sure you're organizing your life so you get to spend most of your time doing the gig, right? Doing the work, doing the work, the thing you like to do. On the other hand, if you are an architect and it's building the system and the process and all these other things, then get as many people as you can to help you do the work part, because your skill is in building the gig itself. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I think a lot of people who are doing the work and building the job actually would like to have a little bit of both. They would like to have some of what you talk about, being an entrepreneur, making money while you sleep, as opposed to freelancing. So they're trying not to be freelancers, but that's what they are.
Right.
So
what I learned is it's really difficult to blend them. And so right now I spend almost all my time as a freelancer, not as an entrepreneur. I rarely make money when I sleep. I'm not organized around doing that. I used to be. And that's a totally different way to spend your day. And so I guess what I'm challenging people to do is pick one and live with it.
Okay, that's really good, because what I felt you were questioning or asking people to think about was, are you really an entrepreneur or are you just a freelancer? And I think there's this idea out there that everybody wants to be an entrepreneur and being a freelancer is not enough. And I like to think that it is enough if that's where your gifts are and where your gifts lie. You agree with that?
Right, yes.
Yeah. So when you say at the moment you're a freelancer, so what about Squidoo and other things that you've got on the go, your books and things?
Right, so Squidoo is an entrepreneurial venture. And I'm really disciplined. I don't do any copywriting for them. I don't do any coding. I don't do any graphic design. I don't go out and make sales calls. The discipline of building that gig, that project, is that I must act like an entrepreneur when I'm doing it, which is out of character for me. I love to dive in and mess with it. But I've hired 7 amazing people who are all smarter than me at what they do, and I get out of their way, right? So most of my time, I'm not doing that. Most of my time, I am giving a speech or writing. And, as I wrote about half-life in books a couple weeks ago, the half-life for my books, every once in a while I'll have one that sells for years and years and years. But generally, 2 months into it, I've sold half the copies that book's ever going to sell. And so I view that as a freelance gig where I have to work on it for a while. I get paid in a short period of time after that, and then I work on the next one. I don't writing books for a living is a really sort of silly way to make a living because it's organized to be not particularly lucrative. I find it's intellectually compelling, and I make just barely enough doing it that I can justify it in my head.
Okay, and it's what you love to do and what you're really
Yeah.
good at.
Well, thank you.
Well, and what you make a difference doing too. Actually, my favorite book of yours is All Marketeers Tell Stories. And it was interesting.
Show us your copy with all the writing in it.
Okay, look guys, this is my copy of the book, and I just showed it to Seth before we came on. And I basically wrote another book inside this book. That's my favorite book of yours, and it was interesting to read again this evening when in your blog you were talking about Apple versus Dell and myths and stories and making promises and delivering and how to make a compelling brand. So I just wondered, because that's something I know my audience is really interested in, is how do you begin to stand out and not to fit in?
Well, I think the most important thing is choosing to do that.
Okay.
A lot of people say they want to stand out, but really what they want are all the benefits of fitting in with a few of the perks of standing out. And part of standing out means that people will laugh at you. Part of standing out means that people will criticize you. Part of standing out means that people will stand up and say, I don't like that person. I don't like what they do. I don't like how they do it. And they will say things about you that aren't true. All those things come with the territory of standing out. And most of the people who I see failing to stand out, even though they think they're trying, are sabotaging themselves. They're standing out in an obnoxious way because they don't actually want to do something that's remarkable. They'd like to have the excuse that say, I tried this and I failed, right? So it's about having the good taste of seeing which edge is available to you in the box and going along there till you've discovered that edge and testing it and figuring out where just the right spot is, where you can find those 1,000 true fans. And if 4,000 people don't get the joke, fine. But if 1,000 people do over time, that's enough, right? Then you found your following. The mistake that so many people make is they decide to be the next blank, the next Bernie or the next Seth Godin or the next whoever, and they follow all the steps because they get some deniability when they do that. Well, the only next we need is the next you. And once you decide to be that you and do it in a remarkable way, and you're persistent, I think you'll find something.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Seth. What do you think is the first rule of telling really good stories?
Well, the original name for the book was All Marketers Are Liars, which was the worst name I ever gave a book. And it's because the people who hadn't read the book yet were offended and didn't buy a copy. The best, most successful stories are true. That the irony in the title is that your story has to be true at its core. And that doesn't mean it has to be facts, because people don't buy facts. They buy stories and they buy emotions. But those stories and emotions have to hold up to scrutiny, right? It's one thing to say, this is the fastest, coolest tech, whatever, in history. But when people start using it, if it's not, then the word of mouth dies. So first you have to make a product. First you have to do writing. First you have to do work that actually is worth talking about. And then you have to tell a story about it that resonates, not just with everyone, but with the worldview of a few people. And just to interrupt myself, the worldview notion is critical. The worldview, as George Lakoff teaches us, is the biases and expectations that people have before they even meet you, right? So if you go to buy a used car, and the guy comes out in the plaid jacket, smoking the cigar, and he looks like, most people have a worldview that says that guy's a liar, that guy's a scam artist. A few people, on the other hand, like buying from someone like that. So it's how you resonate with people and which people you're going to resonate with.
Pete, it's interesting to hear you talking about worldviews because people talk a lot about niches. So do you think niche is the wrong word to be thinking about when you're thinking about building your business? Do you think you need to be thinking more about the people you're going to serve and, you know, the edge?
Well, I mean, it depends on how we're using the word niche. My understanding is it means a little hole. And back to the original Trout and Reese book, Positioning, which is the way you succeed is you find a hole and you fill it. There's nothing wrong with thinking of your marketplace as a whole in the giant universe, right? That you can, as soon as you tell a story, you've already put yourself in a niche, right? That there are very few people who need to appeal to everyone. So you say, no, this is what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to work with those people. I'm not going to sell this kind of product. I'm not going to work on these terms. I'm not going to be at that price point. Well, once you figured out what you're not doing and you can stick with it, what's left is your niche. And I have no problem with that at all.
So that's something I wrote about in my blog the other day, which was, you know, tell people how you're different, not, you know, what you are. Tell people actually how you're different. So it's great to hear you sort of backing that up for me. Just one more question if I can, because I just want to honor your time. I'm just so grateful for you speaking to us today. What do you think is the best way to make our ideas matter?
Well, you know, I guess what I come down to is asking yourself the question, will they miss me if I'm gone? Right? That there are so many things we do in our lives where, you know, if we don't show up for the bus, no one says, wait, make the bus wait here because she's not on the bus yet. Or, you know, we don't show up for our job at the fast food chain and they say, oh, we have to close because there's no one here to flip the burgers. That most of the time we have organized our lives to intentionally do things where we wouldn't be missed if we weren't there because it's safer, it's easier, it gives us way less to worry about, right? And I guess what I'm saying is you need to seek out situations where if you didn't show up, if your blog wasn't posted, if you didn't call on the phone, if you didn't open the door, people would wonder and people would miss you. And then a week later or a month later, they'd still miss you. And we're all capable of that sort of work. It happens in our family for sure. Yeah. And so it's the decision of, do I want to extend the role I have in my family to more people to take on the responsibility of being missed?
I've never heard it expressed like that before, actually. I don't think I've ever heard you say it like that before. Because that
I didn't bring reruns. I brought you all new original material.
I just think that makes so much sense. You know, people will really relate to that. You know, I can surely relate to it. So, yeah, you didn't. This is new material, guys. So, thanks, Seth. It's been amazing talking to you.
Well, you're a rock star. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks.